In order to talk about the sisters and where we came from, I thought it would be helpful to give you just a little bit of history because sisters weren't dropped out of the air and onto this campus. It might look like that sometimes because we look so weird, but anyway, I thought it would give you a kind of an idea of where we came from as far as an organization is concerned. So this is a brief history of the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration. That is the name of our religious community, and we are the sponsors of this university. We are the ones that started the college that Sister Mary just told you about, and that some of you are going to find out more about after this. Our foundress, that is the woman who started our community, is Maria Theresia Banzel, and she is the one for whom Banzel Hall is named. So now you know where that comes from. So talk about the early years of our congregation. She was born in 1830 on September 17th in a town called Olpe, Germany, which is right there. It's not too far from Cologne and Bonn, which is somewhere up there, but I can't find it. There's Bonn, okay, Bonn and Cologne, and so it's over toward the right-hand side. This is a picture of what the town looks like, or at least what it did look like a number of years ago. It's not too much different today. It's in an area of Germany which is called the Sauerland, which means it's not real great for farming because it's rather mountainous. Maria Theresia Banzel was born Aline Banzel. That was her given name, or I should say it was her nickname. And she came from a very wealthy and very religious family. This is a picture of the church where she was baptized. And this picture of the stigmata of St. Francis is there because she was born on that feast day. In other words, the day that we remember when Francis received the stigmata, which you'll learn about in your iConnect class if you haven't learned that yet. She was born on that day, and she said that she crawled out of the wounds of St. Francis and that she was destined to become a Franciscan. Her childhood was rather normal for someone growing up in the 19th century. She was very devoted to the Blessed Sacrament, to Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament, that is the Holy Eucharist or Holy Communion. And her father died when she was 7 years old, so very young, and her mother was left with Aline and her sister. And she was raised according to all the customs of a woman or a young girl in a family of social position. So she was expected to come out as a debutante and have a marriage arranged by her family and so on. In 1850, or around that time, she felt the call by God to become a religious sister, to dedicate her life to God. And she tried to enter a religious community, but her health got in the way. And so she was not able to join that community. They asked her to stay home with good reason. She was also very drawn to the needs of especially poor children at the time. This was during the Industrial Revolution, when a lot of people started working in factories and had to leave their children at home, and in the case of older children, they worked in the factories too. And so people who had to go away to work had to leave their children and very often couldn't come back to care for them. So Aline was very drawn to the idea of helping these children and also helping sick people because they didn't have the social net, like the government didn't have a social net to catch people who were in financial straits in those days. In July 20th of 1860 is considered the founding date of our community, and that is the day when she began living a community life with two other sisters, and it's what we consider the founding of our community. They began living in this building right here, and they started a two-pronged approach to their life, that is adoration, perpetual adoration of Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament, and the care of poor orphan children. The years 1863 to 71 saw tremendous growth in the community, and this is a picture of novices. In other words, young women who have just received the habit, they have just become sisters. And they're all in the same group. All these women came to the community at the same time. They're in the same class in a sense. And so you've got probably about 25 women up there, and Maria Teresa Banzel is right there because she got the whole ball rolling. 1871 saw a real problem with the growth of the community because that was the time of the Kulturkampf in Germany, and the person who was in charge of the government at that time, Kaiser Wilhelm, put a kibosh, if you will, on the Catholic Church, and said that religious communities could no longer accept candidates. They couldn't minister to people in any way. They were supposed to basically die on the vine. And 5 years later, as the community is still growing in some sense, there was a visitor to Germany at that time, and his name was Bishop Joseph Dwenger from the Diocese of Fort Wayne. If you know Bishop Dwenger High School, this is the bishop for whom it was named. And he was visiting, and he saw Maria Teresa Banzel in her mother house there in Olpe, and he said, you know, I think I've got some work for your sisters in the United States. Why don't you send some sisters over? So in 1875, toward the end of that year, they came over on a ship, and within a very short time, they arrived in Lafayette, Indiana, and started setting up housekeeping in this house in Lafayette. And within a month, they started a hospital, which became eventually St. Elizabeth Hospital, which is still going strong in Lafayette, Indiana, if you're from that area. In 1877, more sisters came from Germany, and the sisters then began to staff a school there in Lafayette, which was for German-speaking immigrants, and they started admitting the first young women into the community in the United States. 1879 to 1885, we're talking still about the United States. We see five schools and 4 hospitals, and you just see some of the buildings there. 1886, she had a happy problem. She had so many sisters on 2 continents that she decided to make some governance in each place. Instead of governing the whole thing from Germany, she said, okay, folks in the United States can have their own province, and it's called the Immaculate Heart of Mary province. Folks in Germany, sisters in Germany, would become the Sacred Heart province. And she then becomes the superior general of a very large congregation spanning 2 continents. In Germany, meanwhile, by the 1870s, the Kulturkampf had kind of waned off, and so the congregation began to grow again. And by 1905, Mother Teresa's work was completed in all of the 72 foundations that she had made in Germany alone, and she was called to her eternal reward and died. Her grave is there in Germany, and you can visit her grave today. Meanwhile, back in the States, by 1932, there was significant growth in the United States, mostly in the area of the Midwest, and also out here in the kind of the Midwest West, okay? Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nebraska, all of this area was settled by our sisters, a few sisters in Kansas. Meanwhile, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Ohio, Michigan, and Louisiana. So we were spread out that far. And in 32, they decided to use the Mississippi River as the dividing line so that we could divide the country into 2 provinces and have 2 governing houses, one in Indiana and one in Colorado. So we see these are pictures of the 2 mother houses. The first one, of course, was in Lafayette, and the other one was in Colorado Springs. By 1940, we had established 55 schools. That is, we had enough sisters to go and teach in 55 grade schools. And that was mostly in the areas that I told you about. And these are some pictures of the sisters and what they used to look like. Okay, this is a picture actually of Sister Mary Evelyn's school in Griffith, Indiana. And so you can see them teaching people how to play instruments as well as different, and this is a picture of the sisters in the West at an Indian school where they taught Native Americans. We also had, by 1940, 25 hospitals spread out throughout the United States. And we had 6 orphanages and convalescent homes. So there were probably, I'm guessing, around 500 sisters by that time. By 1940, there were also 2 colleges established. One, St. Joseph College on the Rio Grande. This is a picture of it. And the other one was St. Francis College in Lafayette, Indiana, which Sister Mary just told you about, or will tell you about. And so we want to look at the Eastern Province. That's the province to which we belong right now. So real quickie, back in Lafayette, we've got one area, one block pretty much, which houses all of these entities. It's the Provincial Mother House, that is the headquarters of the sisters in the Eastern Province, and the Formation House, the novitiate, where young women are being trained to become sisters. It is a hospital and a school of nursing. It is a high school and it is a college. All of that within the confines of one city block, and it's being surrounded by urban area in the city of Lafayette. So they're having growing pains. And in 1943, the sisters are looking to relocate some of those entities somewhere else. So the then current bishop of this diocese, Archbishop John Francis Knoll, found out about a property in Mishawaka that used to be the home of the Carlisle family, who were related to the Studebakers, who were the automakers in South Bend. And so the sisters moved up here in 1943. This building then became the headquarters of the Eastern Province, as well as the Formation House, and the high school also moved up there. So they had some growing space, but not enough in Lafayette for the college. And as Sister Mary told you, the college moves to Fort Wayne in 1944. So more recently, we have sisters who are still teaching in grade schools. We have sisters who are in their process of formation, that is, being trained to become sisters. We have sisters who are in nursing or in healthcare services of some kind. And we have our healthcare service is called Franciscan Alliance, and it basically now goes up and down the I-65 corridor in Indiana with 2 campuses in Illinois, most of the campuses in Northwest Indiana around here, and also centering around Lafayette and Indianapolis. We're still connected to the Mother House in Germany because we all belong to the same congregation. And that's a picture of the German Mother House. And in general, I think you could say that our congregation is a powerhouse of prayer, and our missions are powered by prayer, that is, adoration of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So now that was a quick trip through history of the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration, and I think we're ready for some Q&A. We have a list of questions here that the sisters, or that you folks have submitted, and after we get through these, if there's time for any more, then we will take those. Okay. And first question, can sisters get married? Are any sisters married?
No.
Sister Mary's
I think that's part of the choice you make, is not to be married, but to be single and in a vowed relationship. So, and to live in community, not with the community of a family.
Mm-hmm. The next question is for how many sisters live in the house on campus? Sister Jacinta, I'll let you take that one.
We're actually, is this working?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 houses that we're in. 4 sisters live in the house on campus right now, and then the other 4 of us are in a neighborhood right over this way, in the house in the neighborhood.
The next question, what was Francis and Clare's relationship like? If you've ever seen any movies about Francis and Clare, they're all wrong. Francis and Clare had a very good, wholesome, holy relationship that was very much centered on Jesus Christ. They did not have any kind of a sexual relationship at all. They were not attracted sexually to each other. They were attracted to each other's relationship to Christ. And they wanted to dedicate their own lives to Christ. And in some ways, they did that together, even though the groups that they founded and formed had different purposes and were for different people. And you'll find out more about that when you get to the Francis part of iConnect. The next question, what's the difference between a sister and a nun?
We're referred to as sisters, really, because we're out among the people, serving in different ways in education and healthcare. Nuns specifically are women in religious life who live in a cloistered convent, which means they've pulled away from associating with others, and so that they just live with their community of sisters. This way they're able to spend more of their time in prayer, interceding for others, and they do some different types of work right there in the convent where they live.
The next question, how does one become a nun? What's the process of formation? Sister Mary, you want to take that one?
I believe, yeah, it's on. Okay, it's about at least an 8-year process, so it's not something you jump into quickly. We have a number of stages. The first stage is actually kind of an inquiry when you meet our community and you meet our sisters, and they spend time at our mother house and live the life, kind of. And then when it formally begins as a postulancy, which is 1 year, when they still are not in a habit, they just kind of live with the sisters at Mishawaka or go elsewhere and get a sense of what our ministries are. And then there is a 2-year novitiate. The first year is a very quiet year. It's like those kind of nuns. It's like those cloistered sisters. They do very little movement outside of the mother house. They spend a lot of time learning prayer, learning the history of the community, learning what it means to be in religious life, learning about the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Can you stay unmarried? And you're still a sexual being, but you have not involved in a relationship with a man. Can you live that the rest of your life without children and grandchildren? You learn about obedience. Someone's going to tell you where to go. I mean, they tell you where to go all the time, but in my experience, they never sent me to teach 1st or 2nd grade. They knew I'd be a disaster. So they listen to your qualifications and your wishes and your talents. So I would not be sent to teach kindergarten because the poor kids would suffer. And you learn about poverty, what it means to live without excess property and things. So that's mainly the 2 years that you really learn what it means. And then you can take your first vows, and you take temporary vows for 5 years. Normally it's 3 years and then 2 years. And so at the end of that, we're up to 9 years now with inquiry. You're able to ask to make final profession, which means for the rest of your life. And if you feel you need the time, you can ask for a couple more years. So it's a very lengthy process, a lot of discernment between the individual and the sister.
I'm going to jump down to another question that's related to that last question, and it is, what if someone changes their mind after they become a sister? Can one leave the order? And the answer is yes. But usually you change your mind because even though you've made a commitment, you discover for various reasons that perhaps you were never meant to be a sister in the first place. And this comes after a lot of prayer, a lot of talking to probably your confessor, meaning the person who is helping you spiritually. You talk to the sisters that are in charge of your formation, or that sisters that you trust. So usually the sisters have mentors who are helping them. And so after a long time of prayer and discernment, if you find out that maybe you weren't ever meant to be a sister in the first place, yes, you can be released from your vows. It is a process that once you've made perpetual vows, then that has to go to Rome, and actually there has to be a dispensation from your vows. And so, yes, one could leave the order, but it's a very serious decision, and it's not made lightly. Our next question, how does one become a saint? Sister Jacinta?
Well,
she's our resident saint.
Oh, yeah, right. How does one become a saint? Well, I would say it's a whole life process, and so it's, a thing here of looking at the big picture. Where am I going in life? And asking some of those deeper questions. What's it all about? Behind all that, what we believe is that God wants a relationship with everyone. that our loving God called us into existence, knows us better than we know ourselves, knows how we'll be the happiest, and what means there are to fulfill that in our lives and draw us closer to God. And so it's through prayer, really, and reflection, and getting advice from others, thinking about our own lives, our own experiences, that a person can grow closer to God and basically live their life to its fullest. And that's really, I think, holiness, being a saint or being holy is holistic.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. I think if you read Paul's writings, and very often Paul writes to the saints who live in the church at. And St. Paul would say that, the majority of people in this room are saints because we're living in good relationship with God. And so it doesn't necessarily mean any kind of legal definition. It's a person who has become a saint in Paul's definition.
Why do some sisters not dress in a habit? Sister Mary, you want to handle that one?
Because they don't want, no. Different communities have different rules and regulations, so it depends on what your community has decided is appropriate. And so.
Yeah, and obviously our community, we've all decided together that we would wear a habit of some kind, but you notice that we dress a little bit differently. You see the 8 of us, and there's basically 2 different styles of dress, and that's by personal choice within our community. There, we have a kind of a dress code, and within the limits of the dress code, that's how we dress. And so that's why you see a little bit different habits. Do you all live together on campus? I think we kind of covered that one in a previous question. What is your story of being called to the sisterhood? What's your call story? Rather than hear all 3 of our call stories, I'll toss the coin and see who would like to tell quickly their call story. Sister Jacinta?
Mine would take a while, I think, but I will try to give a shorter version, I guess. Let's see. I went to school at Purdue in my hometown of Lafayette, West Lafayette, and graduated in the field of interior design. At that time, I just figured, I'll get married and have a family and design my own dream house and live happily ever after. And I was very much into my career in design. I graduated and I worked in that for a couple years. But during my senior year, I went through a real questioning time, all kinds of things about my life and where I was going and what it was about. And through it all, I wanted some guidance from the good Lord, but didn't seem to be hearing, didn't seem to be receiving any guidance that I could hear. So since I wasn't hearing too well, finally it dawned on me, well, maybe I need a closer relationship with God to hear better. So I asked him for that, and within a couple weeks, that prayer was answered, though I didn't realize it at the time. A friend invited me to go to a prayer group with her, and the prayer group experience was life-changing for me, really, because it was kind of a conversion experience for me. And before that, I just thought, you just do what you want to do in life, and I didn't really think of the idea of vocation. The whole idea of vocation is that God has a plan for us. And so after having this change of perspective, I began praying differently. Lord, show me what is your plan for me. Help me come to understand that. And still, it took some time. I moved to the other side of the state, got a job over there in a kitchen and bath remodeling business, but I just didn't like it too well, and I ended up getting laid off the job, actually. But during my time over there, that's when I was Well, there's another piece of this, I guess, that, I don't know, are we running out of time?
We're getting close.
But also my senior year, a friend had invited me to retreats at our mother house in Mishawaka. And I just thought, like a nice getaway weekend. You know, I signed up for actually 2 retreats, got busy with stuff at school, and never went. But the sisters had my retreat registration, and one of the sisters started writing to me. So I'm on my own, you know, after graduation, and I'm praying to know God's will. I'm not real satisfied with my life at the current time. And the sister is writing to me and saying, I wish more young women could experience the happiness of being a sister. And one day I come home from work to my little apartment, and all of a sudden this idea comes out of the clear blue. I could be a sister.
Could have had a V8.
Yeah, and it just really, it blew my mind because I'd never really thought of it seriously for myself before. But you know, looking back, it's like when you get an inspiration that, you know, just sort of happens, you know, it's like, well, maybe that's the Holy Spirit speaking. So I received some advice to give it time, and if the idea doesn't go away, follow up and do something. Well, I tried to carry on with life as usual, but the idea wouldn't go away. So I started visiting the sisters up at the mother house in Mishawaka and just seeing what their life was like. And finally, after another year and a half, I thought, well, yeah, it seems like I should give this a try at least. I'm still here.
And I think what Sister said just goes along with the next question on our list. How did that calling fit into your career plans? And I think what Sister was saying was, we may have career plans, but when we start, you know, connecting with God in prayer and really having a serious relationship with God, we find out that He has career plans. And that may not necessarily be to religious life. It could be to married life. It could be dedicating yourself as a single person to, you know, a cause that is very worthwhile and or a humanitarian cause of some kind. And that when you listen to God and His plans for your life, you find out that your career plans actually kind of mesh with His very often. And sometimes you find out that they're totally different. But when you give it a shot, you find out, yeah, I'm happier here than I would have been in the other. Next question is, did you have to sacrifice any activities, hobbies, items, hopes, or dreams when you became a sister? And this is going to be our last question. Sister Mary, do you want to handle that one?
Yeah, I don't play tennis as much. I mean, you know, there were certain things you have to give up mainly because of time. Because as religious, we have commitments to community time and prayer time, and not, you know, outside of giving up a husband and a family and grandkids. Yes, I mean that I had to give up, but other than that, not much in terms of my own interests and hobbies.
Mm-hmm. Each one of us has hobbies or things that we do when we're not checking papers or are doing something like that. And there are things that we do that are very fulfilling, just like you do. Like Sister Mary and I both like to cook and bake, and of course the people that live with us like that too. So.
Oh, yes. I like to play in the dirt.
Yes.
I'm a gardener.
Yeah. So, and you know, some people do crafts and things like that. So. That's all the time we have. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you so much.